This holiday season, recharge with the Planet Fitness Black Card for just $1 down and $24.99 a month. So instead of fighting a stranger in the mall over a stuffed T-Rex, bring a friend for free and work out on the TRX. Instead of freezing in line for a lame holiday deal, relax in the Black Card Spa with some hydro massage feels. Instead of being trapped at your in-laws, escape to any of our 2,400 Planet Fitness locations. Sign up today for the Planet Fitness Black Card, just $1 down and $24.99 a month. Cancel anytime. Deal ends November 30th. See Club for details.
Welcome to the #1 podcast covering Michigan State basketball. The Final Four is not in the schedule. Join Rod and me, Eric, as we dive deep into the Spartans to get you prepared for every game. Subscribe today for in-depth recruiting updates and fantastic interviews with today's important college basketball personalities like Robbie Hummel.
Thank you for having me. I have listened to your guys' podcast numerous times on drives throughout any Midwestern Big Ten city. So I am big fans of your guys' work.
Jay Billis.
And next time, hey, if anybody in Michigan wants a December tea time, call me. You wimps won't show up, but I'll be there. I'll be there and play in the cold. And Izzo will be in front of the fire with hot chocolate.
Coaches Thomas Kelly.
Oh, no problem. Glad to be back, man. Glad to be back.
Mike Garland.
Just can't sit there and trade twos for threes. You can't do it. You're gonna lose. Coming down the stretch, you're gonna lose.
And more. You won't find better coverage of Spartan hoops than you will get here. For both the casual and hardcore fan, come along as we take you for a green and white ride. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod to preview MSU's upcoming game against the Georgia Southern Eagles on Tuesday night in East Lansing. I know I've mentioned it before, but the show has experienced a massive growth over the last year. Thanks so much, and I hope you appreciate the content we bring for you each and every game. We love doing the show. It's a small thing to ask, but please pause the show, leave a 5-star written review on your podcast player. It'd mean the world to us and really helps the algorithms help other Spartan fans like you find the show. Continue recommending the show to your friends, and if you haven't, please prescribe. It's free. So, Rod, let's talk about the Eagles from Georgia Southern. They're out of the Sun Belt. They're a sub-300 KenPom team. So, again, this is a team that we expect Michigan State to handle easily, and probably one of the worst teams on Michigan State's schedule outside of Southern Indiana. Well, and certainly it'd be, unless they face someone in the NCAA tournament, they're really not going to see someone this poor because there's no one this bad in the Big Ten. They have not been good on either end of the court, which is not surprising. On offense, they can sort of offensive rebound. They're a top 100 team in that category. Other than that, they don't shoot threes very well. They're really bad shooting twos. On defense, they've been getting crushed defending the threes. They foul a lot, and a really, really bad defensive rebounding team. So their profile seems very similar to Elkhorn State in many ways, at least in the sense of just really struggling. In fact, they're, I guess, even worse than Elkhorn State in a lot of those categories.
Yeah, and I think that this is a smart scheduling move by Michigan State because you have a big gap between the Arizona game and those first two Big Ten games, right? Which I think the first one is on the road at Nebraska, right? First one is at Nebraska. Is it home against Wisconsin?
Right. I thought it was, but I'll check it. I'll look it up. Yeah,
Either way.
Yeah.
The first Big Ten game. And I think you want to have an opportunity to play someone to stay sharp. So you don't, you got to play a game. But this isn't a spot where I think it would be ideal to play, I don't know, a stiffer, well, let's say a James Madison. I don't think you want, somebody of that level. You want a game that I think you can work on yourself and continue to work on getting rotation set, figuring out what are optimal playing groups, those types of things. Mm-hmm. This should be a game that allows you to do that.
Right. Yeah, and it's actually the 5th at home against Wisconsin. Then they play Nebraska the 10th.
There we go.
But yeah, I think, and certainly it's helpful having a game like this where you're coming off a game, which might, you got coming off the Arizona game. It's tough. And so it's good to get a game that ahead of time. This is a good game to sort of get things squared away, like you said, before we get into the games that count. Because the Big Ten games, they definitely mean more than these other games in the non-conference. I mean, obviously you don't want to lose any game, but the Big Ten games you want to have better focus on.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about the players on Georgia Southern. This is brought to you by the Brothers of Just Through Gutters. They are the ones who feature the player that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter, who Rod will mention and point out in just a little bit. The Brothers who just do gutters, well, guess what? They just do gutters. That's all they do. They do a fantastic work. They can do commercial real estate. They can work on residential. Whatever you have needs for with the gutter work, they are the ones to take care of it. And it's not very exciting, but it is very important, because if you don't take care of your water, it can cause all kinds of damage to your siding, to your sidewalks, your driveway. It get water into your basement. So effectively moving water away from your roof, away from the foundation, is important. And so they'll make sure that it's all taken care of. If you just need the gutters cleaned out, they can do that. If you need them repaired, they can do that. If you need leaf guards, they can do that. And if you need them replaced, guess what? They can do that too. So they will do anything you need when it comes to gutters, because again, that's all they do. They'll take care of all that stuff. So you don't have to get on the ladder. You don't have to do all this work. I had to help my foster son put a gutter up in his house because he can't afford to do much else except his own stuff. And I ended up slicing my thumb because, that's so anyway, if you don't want to deal with all that stuff, the Brothers of Just Do Gutters are the ones to call. So you can find their contact information on your podcast player below. You can also go to the website, and you can find ways to get a hold of Kurt on the west side of the state in the Grand Rapids area, or Greg over in the Metro Detroit area. They can hook you up and take care of things. 10% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate from them. So we'll begin with this. There are suspected starters in a lot of these small teams. They rotate who starts games for all sorts of various reasons. So these are our best guess, I guess we'll say, since you never really know for sure. We'll begin with Deuce Dean, 6'4" transfer from Hampton. He leads them in scoring and is not a very good shooter, but he's probably, he's their best scorer, I guess. Although he's not a Trey, he's a Deuce. So, he won't hurt you as bad from deep, right?
Yeah, this is the guy to keep in the gutter. He's been, by a considerable margin, their top scorer. Had a lot of experience playing at Hampton, transferred over to Georgia Southern for this year. And yeah, he's the guy MSU is going to probably be looking to focus on.
Next would be Tyren Moore, 5'11" senior. He leads the team in assists, but doesn't shoot very well, which kind of goes along with the team for the most part. And so he's a guy who's, I guess, just going to be a facilitator, I assume, to guys like Deuce Dean.
Yeah, it's a problem when you're 5'11" and you're not able to hit jump shots consistently. That makes you a lot easier to guard.
Yeah. Well, and my problem playing basketball is I couldn't also handle the ball. So I was really not very effective as, a guy.
It's a really tough spot to be in.
Yeah. When you're 5'6", when I was playing in high school, I was 5'6", I couldn't handle the ball and I couldn't shoot. There wasn't much point of you being on the floor. So I wasn't exactly the go-to guy in the IM team. So we'll go on to Malik Tidwell as 5'11" senior guard, also 5'11". He transferred up from D2. And he's third on the team in scoring, but again, he's a small guy and he doesn't have a great shot from distance.
Same problem. Yeah, there's just not. I mean, we're giving short shrift to this, but there's just not a lot to talk about in terms of the capabilities of this group. So
then we'll get into their size. Avante Parker, 6'9", 210 freshman, top rebounder on the team, which is maybe not saying much because they are really a pretty terrible rebounding team, but he tends to get fouled a lot.
Yeah, he's averaging right around 5 free throw attempts a game. So that's a good sign. And look, the interesting thing, the difference between this team and some of the other teams, Southern Indiana and Alcorn, that we've talked about recently this season, that are kind of at this level, is these guys have not loaded up on a heavy dose of fifth-year seniors, grad transfers. There's some younger players here, so they seem to be trying the developmental route. And this kid being an example, he's a true freshman.
Yeah, and for those who've been paying attention, James Madison is on Sun Belt team as well. So this is the second Sun Belt team, actually, I should say, will play this season.
Team is not picked to win the Sun Belt, though.
Yeah. Yeah, different caliber within. There's definitely a bigger disparity in quality in that conference than there is even in the Big Ten, right, from top to bottom. Yeah. Finally, we're rounding out what we suspect the starting five is Carlos Curry, 6'11", 240-pound senior. Started at Ole Miss as a freshman, but he averages only 13 minutes a game, so he may start, but he doesn't, from a minute standpoint, he doesn't seem to provide a lot, except a little bit of shot blocking with a little over a game, a game.
And you see this sometimes. We see this coming out of the Big Ten at times. You'll have guys that get a Big Ten or an SEC, in this case, level offer because they've got size and potential. And then it doesn't always develop. Figuring out which big men are going to see the light turn on and which ones aren't is, I think, probably the single most challenging thing in player evaluation. It is difficult at times to be able to tell who it's going to click for and who it isn't. So in Curry's case, obviously a guy where it didn't click at the high major level, clearly, because here he is years down the line playing for a not great Sun Belt program, and he's only getting 13 minutes a game, but at least he offers legitimate size.
Yeah, I think it's funny too. You look at these big men, and people get sort of tied in knots when it comes to who's starting and who's not starting a game. And, the first two games as Carson Cooper started, or the game before that, he played more minutes than Sissoko, and then he starts and plays less. And it's funny how it doesn't really. In some ways, it doesn't matter. Maybe I guess maybe the most important thing is who finishes the game is probably the more important than who's starting it.
Well, there's the only way that you can make a really strong case for a starting lineup mattering is when you were facing the issues that Michigan State did at the outset of the year, where you got off to these killer bad starts. Then you can say, hey, we got to find a combination that gets us into the game a little quicker. That's fine. There's legitimacy to that. Beyond that, if you're getting off to decent starts, no matter who's out there, it truly does not matter. What matters is the number of minutes played and the impact when you're on the court. And so you see this more often than I think people think. Michigan State did it. Michigan State did it the year they went to the second of the back-to-back Final Four seasons in 2009, 2010. Derek Nix was a true freshman who started. I don't know if he started every game, but he started a ton of them. And I don't recall off the top of my head how many minutes he played, but they were not starter minutes. I'll guarantee you that. But they started him because there was something about that at the outset of the game that Izzo liked. And teams do that more frequently than you might think.
Yeah, well, I mean, that in many ways, that's the non-conference tinkering that Izzo's always doing, right? He's trying to figure out where to maximize the results, and then you sort of can, in some ways, just test and validate it during the regular season, and then you should hopefully have an idea of what you need to do when it comes to the postseason.
Right.
So then we'll talk about the suspected reserves. We'll begin with Jamar Franklin, 6'2" sophomore from South Alabama. He's the second leading scorer on the team, but mainly because he shoots a lot, but not super efficient. As a freshman at South Alabama, he shot 36%.
Yeah, so he'd be one guy as opposed to some of the others where you can understand perhaps having some hope that he's going to find the range at a little better rate. But yeah, for now, he's a volume scorer, not an efficient one.
Next would be David Jones, 6'8" junior forward and center. He came from the JUCO ranks and has been one of the rebounders on the team in a team that's struggling to find people to rebound.
Yeah, he was hurt to begin the year, but he started playing more recently, and so he'll give them something of a rebounding presence, even though he's not a bruiser. He's presumably at 6'8", got some length, and is active.
Next will be Cam Bryant, 6'7" senior. He's been a good scorer and rebounder who has been a mid-30s three-point shooter in the past, but has been struggling a little bit this year so far.
Yeah, that's another guy that I think they would hope can dial it in as the year goes on. And he's played a lot of basketball for them. So, on a team that doesn't have a ton in the way of returning, veteran presence and production, that matters.
And the next would be Nate Bradford, 6'9" sophomore in the second year with the program. He's been playing a lot more, up to almost 20 minutes a game. And he's their best three-point shooter so far.
Yeah, that's a nice thing to have. Again, a younger player, a nice piece to have as they try to build this thing out. To have a guy with that kind of size who can stretch the floor, they'll hope that shooting continues because that could be a really nice weapon.
And finally, Colin Cool, 6'7" freshman, playing about 14 minutes a game. And doesn't shoot a lot, but tends to be a player, at least who plays inside, and seems to be pretty successful when he's in shooting.
Yeah, he's got a very, very good shooting percentage in the
sure.
early going. And so that's encouraging to see from a freshman that he knows what constitutes a good shot. They just would hope that he takes more.
Yeah, we've seen players like that in the past. And like, what is it? Who was it from Northwestern? Who was there? Barron? Was that the guy?
Robbie Baran.
Yeah, Robbie Baran.
Every year. Every year I talk about it.
Okay, well, let's talk about the keys to the game then for Michigan State, brought to you by Nudge Printing. Nudge Printing, your one-stop shop for Spartan apparel and other collegiate apparel. They have a great line of all the vintage Spartan logos and things like that from your past, or maybe things you haven't even seen because you're just a young buck. So check out their stuff. You can go to nudgeprinting.com. I've got a sort of vintage old Sparty, gruff Sparty with a dunking a basketball. They've got all kinds of things like that, and football. And they've really old ones too, from even before Rod's time, like guys with the leather helmets on. So
yeah.
Cheap shot. Shouldn't do that around Thanksgiving time, right? And then so you can get the high quality apparel. It's at again nudgeprinting.com. 20% off for listeners to the show if you type in Final Four as one word at checkout. You can also find all kinds of other non-apparel things there too, like decals, wall stickers. That's actually how Nudge Printing got its start, where Gabe was just looking for some of the large wall stickers and couldn't find one, so he decided to print his own. And then his friends wanted to buy some, and before you know it, he's got himself a business. So check out Nudge Printing, great Spartan alums there, all Michigan-made apparel and stickers and everything. So 5 keys to the game. Number 1, play the game. So very similar to when we talked about Elkhorn State, playing the game and not the opponent.
Yeah, look, in games like this, it's always the preeminent thing that I think you worry about is your team able to focus on doing the things that you want them to do to continue to get better rather than, well, we just got to do what we need to beat this team, because that should be a foregone conclusion, honestly. I mean, it isn't always, but it should be.
Yeah.
And so if you approach the game the way that you should, if you're a team in Michigan State's position, then the conclusion really is foregone, because you're not going to lose a game like this if you're bringing the requisite focus.
Yeah, this is just like against Elkhorn State. You hope to see the starters not play a whole lot of minutes. You know, you should say everybody should be in the 20s, not in the 30s, because that would suggest real problems there.
That's right.
Number 2, rotation. So just like in Elkhorn State, it's a good opportunity to get different combinations of players out on the floor, but also to get minutes for guys like Booker. Guys you want to try and develop a little bit more and give them an opportunity to get some real game action.
Well, it's a balance here, and this is what I'm trying to get at, because the next one after this, you got 2 Big Ten games,
right.
And so those are games that have a heightened importance. They're the most important games in a real sense that you play during the entirety of November and December, are those 2 Big Ten games. So this is a last chance to get the rotations right before you play those 2 games. And so, yes, you want a situation where you can play everybody a fair amount of minutes, but you also want to be fine-tuning what the playing groups are going to look like. So, when that first media timeout hits at the under 16, who's coming in for who?
Right.
I think right now the indications we have would be that whichever big man is not starting usually seems to come in at that TO.
Yep.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
But then beyond that, did they do anything else? What order? We've seen some differences in the early going in terms of the order in which Booker and Carr come into the game. Initially, Carr was coming in first. More recently, we've seen Booker come in first. How quickly do you go to Jeremy Fears and Trey Holloman in the backcourt? These are all things that, as Jackson Kohler comes back, we're not sure that he's going to play in this game. I don't think he will, but it's possible. If he does, though, how do you factor him into this?
Right.
So those are the things. That's the counter to, well, just play everybody. and don't worry so much about continuity and getting guys used to playing with each other, because we're just trying to get everybody some run to work on their games individually. It's also got to be about fine-tuning how guys play with each other.
Yeah, because the important thing too, usually it feels, now last year is a bit of an exception because Michigan State dropped their first game in their first Big Ten game in December, but they usually play, not patsies, but they tend to have a little bit softer Big Ten schedule in December, and then they play the tougher games later. I think that's by design from the Big Ten, but this year they're going to play two teams that are going to be probably pretty decent. You've got at Nebraska and then home against Wisconsin.
Well,
I mean, those are two tougher games probably you're going to face in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
They're not playing Northwestern, they're not playing Penn State, they're not playing Minnesota.
The home game against anybody but Purdue is, that's one you ought to get,
sure.
Right? Purdue would be the only one that's questionable. Road game, yes, I think Nebraska's got a chance to be better, but truthfully, if you're looking at, go back to our previews, if you're looking at the Big Ten, where else would you rather play a road game? Minnesota and Penn State, and that's probably about it. So I still think, We'll see, maybe. But I think they did get a break. Actually, I don't think you're right, though. Historically, it is an interesting thing, isn't it? That we have not seen many examples of Michigan State dealing with a real heavyweight in these December games.
I mean, I don't remember them ever playing anyone really. They don't play in Illinois or.
Yeah, you haven't seen Purdue. You certainly haven't seen Michigan,
Ohio State.
It's tended to be teams at this end of the. I mean, there haven't been that many opportunities. We've only been playing these December games for about 5 years, but yeah, it is noticeable that there haven't been those big, heavyweight clashes. Which, by that standard, the Wisconsin home game, you're right. I don't mean to poo-poo that. It is a stiffer test than we might typically see, but it's not, it's not as if the second game of the year they're going to West Lafayette.
No, yeah, I agree. Although I do feel like we always play Penn State or Northwestern or some combination.
Frequently they have.
First two games in December.
Frequently they have. I think
or Nebraska,
you're right.
Yeah. All right. So the third key to the game is bury them. So again, this getting off to a strong start, just like against Elkhorn State. Finish off any chances that this team has a chance of winning, and then then you can just work on yourself and have a stress-free environment, and one in which I can enjoy my ice cream sandwich without worrying.
Yep. Keep the important things, keep things in perspective.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's always the goal in games like this. Don't let them hang around. Don't let them get confidence. Decide it early. Give yourself a break. Give yourself an opportunity to do some things intentionally rather than, wow, we got to find a way to win this game.
Fourth key to the game, crisp play. And this has nothing, I imagine, to do with crackers.
No, any game you play, but especially one like this, it's really easy to fall into the trap of playing sloppy because that comes with a lack of focus, comes with maybe not taking the opponent seriously, trying to do things to generate energy that's otherwise lacking. So you try to do too much. Mm-hmm. Those are the things you want to avoid. And I actually think Michigan State did a pretty good job of this against Alcorn.
Yes.
You'd like to see a repeat of that where it's low turnovers. For the most part, they were locked in defensively. Those are the kind of things you want to see show up.
And the fifth and final key to the game, defensive rebounding. So there's not much this team does except miss shots. So you want to make sure that they only get one missed shot per possession.
And then, it's the only thing that they really do reasonably well offensively. So, okay, if you're Michigan State, you look at it and say that's where the challenge is. Mm-hmm. And Michigan State has had some problems in the early going on the defensive boards. So you want to look at that, realize, okay, this is an opportunity in this area of the game. Even if they're overmatched otherwise, this is one thing they've shown an ability to do. So we need to stop that. And it also happens to correspond with something that Michigan State needs to improve.
And then I guess a bonus key is the opportunity for Steven Izzo to actually score a point in a game that is not exhibition. Well, and this is probably one of the better opportunities.
You make a good point. The Alcorn State game was kind of disappointing in that sense because it looked like he was going to get extended run. And then about, what was it? Maybe halfway, I think it was 3 minutes to go when he came in, which is a lot more time than is normal for his appearances. And he did manage to draw a foul. Unfortunately for him, they were one short of being in the penalty.
Yeah.
So it didn't get him to the line. But he did think he was going to the line at first. But right after that, he and Davis Smith got tangled up and they both had to come out of the game because they were bleeding. And that was it. There wasn't an opportunity for him to score. So this would be one of the few games left where you could see an extended, like it was against Alcorn, where it's 3 minutes. So you'd figure that's at least 3-4 possessions that you're going to get. That's what you want.
And it is remarkable how small he looks. Like, he's not a big guy. Let's not, kid ourselves in general, just like for average people, but he's not tiny. But on a basketball court, your perception is so jaded from, like a small guy's like 5'11", right? Yeah.
It drives it home.
I don't think he's 5'9" or 5'10".
It drives home the reality. You look at Michigan State's, two of Michigan State's guards, Jaden Akins and AJ Hogard, they're not tiny guards, but they're not big guards. AJ is a little broader, obviously, but they both are about 6'3", 6'4". They're big human beings. Mm-hmm. They're just not big on a Big Ten basketball court.
Right. Yeah, I remember the last game of the season last year. After the game, I was on the court and talking to people, but he walked by. I'm like, well, I'm taller than him, and that's saying something. He's
right.
And I guess even when you see him out with Alcorn State, he is a decisive disadvantage athletically and just skill wise. I mean, there's just no question. And that's one of the worst teams they're going to face all year, and so that gives you an idea how good these college basketball players are. Not that should surprise anybody, but it's easy to kind of forget, when you see a team that's overwhelmed, that they're actually pretty good athletes. If they're your high school, they're probably your best player on your team, most likely. Depends where you go at high school, I guess. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, any further thoughts about Georgia Southern?
No, I think we've covered it. This is one Michigan State hopefully will win easily and use to get some work done.
Well, it is the last non-conference game before the two Big Ten go-arounds. So those games, I think, begin December 3rd, which means you have very little time to get your entry in for the Beat Rod contest. You can send them to me, Eric at tffinots.com. Please get those entries into me. You want to give me your projected standings for the Big Ten, 1 through 14. We'll use the tiebreakers based on the seeding for the Big Ten tournament. The tiebreaker for our contest, which had to get used last year, is based on how many points Michigan State scores against Michigan this year. And remember, they do play them twice. So it's just Michigan State's and how many points Michigan State scores. Get those into me before the deadline, before the first game is played, because then you're just cheating if you know already the records of Big Ten teams. So you got to have it in before any Big Ten games are played. So again, get those in. If you have not yet had a chance, please leave a written review of the podcast player. Also, check out our great sponsors at brothersgutters.com and nudgeprinting.com. You won't regret either of those decisions. You'll be glad you did. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.
This holiday season, recharge with the Planet Fitness Black Card for just $1 down and $24.99 a month. So instead of fighting a stranger in the mall over a stuffed T-Rex, bring a friend for free and work out on the TRX. Instead of freezing in line for a lame holiday deal, relax in the Black Card Spa with some Hydro Massage feels. Instead of being trapped at your in-laws, escape to any of our 2,400 Planet Fitness locations. Sign up today for the Planet Fitness Black Card, just $1 down and $24.99 a month. Cancel anytime. Deal ends November 30th. See Club for details.
At Raising Cane's, we're hyper-focused on being the best at what we do and getting it right every time. It's our one love. But is the hype real? Yeah, it's real good.
Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers, one love.